Hey there, my name is Muhammad, and this is the first video on my new channel. My fiance's birthday is on the 6th of January, and I'm trying to create a video game for her as a gift for her birthday. I want to make something simple that I can finish in 3 months, but still, other from it being personal and touching to her specifically, I want it to be playable. I want the mechanics to be fun and the story to make sense. This video kicks off the series where I will share my progress, the challenges encountered, and the little triumphs along the way. So, if you are into game development or just curious about the process, feel free to tag along. I'll be using Unity as a game engine, and I decided that the game will be a 2D side-scroller adventure. The reason being mainly that it's simpler, especially with animations and graphics, given my zero art skills. Ironically, my fiancé is the artist between us, currently diving into the realms of digital art and character design. However, this game is a surprise, so I am on my own. While I thought about having a character sprite modeled after her, I might resort to hire a freelancer for the character design and animations later on. Initially, I will be using some imported assets to get the ball rolling. I wanted the game to echo my fiancé's artistic journey. She has a collection of amazing paintings that we both adore. Integrating her artistry into the game was a no-brainer. I envisioned a game where each level represents a painting, a year in her life, culminating in a special birthday message on her 25th year. Then, the idea slowly morphed into a concept where she brings color to a monochrome world. After more brainstorming, I decided that the main feature in the game shall be that she draws things that come to life. Things that become game objects with different properties that she, her character, can then interact with. I really liked the idea. I thought there will be different colors and different brushes, and their combinations would define how a drawn object would behave. Red color, for example, could make burning objects, while yellow color could make objects that would electrify enemies. A certain brush makes objects that fall, while another makes objects that are static or move forward, and so on. A bit of digging around showed that the concept had some originality. The closest resemblance I found was a game called Sketch Tales, but it veered off significantly from what I had in mind. It looked a lot more involved. It was reassuring to know that I was onto something unique. I did not dig deep enough to confirm how different Sketch Tales is, but the trailer at least put my mind at ease. If any of you is watching this video and has played Sketch Tales before, please let me know in the comments. I then dived into Unity, setting up a 2D project titled Brushed Memories, a placeholder name for now. I imported some assets to start with, and made a very simple temporarily camera movement and player movement with double jump and a flip. I can stomach all the shitty movement for a while, but a character moving backwards is just wrong. The plan here is basically to do some spike implementation of the core feature, that is, to draw things that come to life, things that the character can then interact with. I started by defining a line renderer that is updated while the left mouse button is down to draw more points, and that is then reset once the mouse button is released. This allowed me to be able to draw on the screen, which was pretty nice to see this fast with this little code. I then started thinking about how the object would actually come to life. I found this really nice bake mesh method that could be called on the line renderer, which was super handy. I used this to create a mesh renderer and a filter, which allows me to keep an object after I reset the line renderer. Now, the most important part about an object you want to interact with is its collider. I used Edge Collider 2D and the points already existing on the line renderer to create a working collider. I then decided to make a particle effect. I wanted to make something very simple for now, just to prove that the core feature works, so I made a fire effect using Unity's particle system. I then updated the script so the particle effect is instantiated after n number of points in the line renderer. I here also noticed that if I keep holding the mouse button at the same position, then there will be more points density at that position, which felt wrong. So I made a simple fix, where instead of creating a point every frame, I create one when the last point is within a certain distance to the current position. And this was the result. This was a great exploration that I think proved to me that the feature makes a lot of sense. The main reason for this was the amount of customization I could do for the drone object. There were many properties that could be configured for the line renderer, and many things that could be added to the collider, the rigid body, the particle effect, and so on, that could make enough combinations and variations to make this feature fun. The next step was to implement the necessary skeleton for the core feature that would make it easy to create brushes and colors as needed. I started to make everything that could result in a different behavior or look for the drone object configurable. I made brush properties and paint properties classes that I planned to connect to certain pickable items, which would then configure the line renderer and the drone object to behave and look a certain way. And that gave me a very nice drawing manager that allows me to configure many things, like speed, gravity scale, colors, rotation, rigidity, and so on. And this is how it looked like. Notice the amount of possible combinations of configurations for the paint and the brush properties, and the effects on the drone object. This is the last functional bit of the core feature. I am of course yet to do some polishing and generate the actual brushes and paints. But here, I created some objects with attached scripts that makes them pickable, which, upon being picked, would call the drawing manager setPaint or setBrush method and configure the line renderer, particle effect, behavior, and so on based on the picked paint or brush. I made an iPickable interface and an abstract pickable item to make it very easy to maybe later extend this list. I then made a brush and a paint scripts, which I then used to create specific prefabs representing 2 brushes and 2 paints. These 2 brushes and paints are each holding a bunch of configurable properties and are of course only examples of how the items could be in the end. I also created another particle effect to be used for one of the paints. Hulk effect? I have no idea what that would do, but this is just a demonstration. So, the 2 brushes define how the drone object moves. The triangular brush draws objects that are rigid and that move with a certain speed, while the circle brush draws objects that are completely static, which you can even jump on top of and go to places. And then the 2 paints define, well, for now, only colors and particle effects. The journey has just begun, and the full picture of the game is yet to emerge. The game could eventually be a puzzle, where you would need to draw specific things using specific tools, or an adventure, where it would make more sense and be more satisfying to draw things in a certain way in a certain tool. The character interaction with the drawn objects then could be in many ways, which I could think about later. However, this progress, made in a week, has fueled my excitement. Balancing a full-time job as a software engineer with this passionate project is challenging but utterly rewarding. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the game development process and are keen on following this journey, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There is more to come and I'm thrilled to share it all with you. Cheers for now!